Good morning. Hi, this is Karen. I'm with Spiritual Intuitions, and I'm here to talk to you today and do a reading on fear, false evidence appearing real, and how that is instrumental in the enemy's plan to attack and abuse uh, women in general. But specifically, I like to talk about my life and my experiences. So I'm going to do my best to be vulnerable and open up and share with you some examples that come through about how fear played a major role in me staying in an abusive relationship for a very long time. Now, I want to preface this to say that even though I endured a relationship that was abusive for a very long time, I really, at this point, and my perspective could change down the line, but at this point, I really think that I needed to be in that relationship and to learn the lessons that that relationship had for me. That abusive relationship taught me many, many lessons. And it took me as long as it took me to learn the lessons, which was a very long time. But time is relative, okay? I can't put a value on the wisdom that I gained, on the lessons that I learned. I cannot put a monetary value on that. It did cost a lot in terms of time, because we all have a limited amount of time that we have here in this life. So I dedicated over 30 years of my life to trying to heal and figure out and understand and come up out of uh, an abusive relationship. And it wasn't just one. I'd have to say it was many, because that was my life. I grew up poor for the most part. Well, the first part of my life was like middle class. I was born in North Carolina, to a middle class African American family who was pretty well established, but they were into some seedy things. And eventually all of that broke down, and my mother married and moved to Brooklyn, New York, which was the ghetto. And from there, from about age 10 on, I was raised in poverty. So I have a double experience. I have one of being in a stable family that had resources and connections and so forth and so on, but weren't exactly integral when it comes to law abiding citizens. And then I had a life where there was nothing that was normalized. There was nothing that was according to what society said it should be or should look like. It was like I felt like I was, when I moved to Brooklyn, I felt like I was thrown into a zoo with a bunch of crazy people who didn't know how to operate in the regular world. So they were relegated to the ghetto. That's my experience of what happened when I moved to Brooklyn. And so, that didn't mean that I wasn't subject to all of the ill effects of poverty, of what occurs when you don't have protection, you don't have networks that are supportive of your well-being. So I became very vulnerable when we moved to New York. And I think that that's where the real basis for my abuse started. The things that allowed me, or my conditioning and my training, started when we moved to Brooklyn. My stepdad, he used to constantly berate me. And he would call it reverse psychology. And he would do it in front of my mom, and she would not say anything. And I mean, call it just whatever. It was like, you're never going to be anything, you're no good, the this, any demeaning thing and downplaying that he could do, he did, in terms of dominating and shaping who I thought I was, my ego, my young, susceptible, vulnerable ego, at a time when I was very susceptible because I was alone. I didn't have any network that I could depend on to combat what it was that he was putting down. So I grew up with a very low self-esteem. I had a lot of triggers. My mother wasn't defending me. I had to fend for myself. And so there is a perfect setting for someone who could later in life be subject to major abuse, because I had a lot of issues and I never dealt with them. They were never addressed professionally, emotionally. There were a lot of hidden things that had happened in my life that I wasn't privy to, and I still don't know everything that happened. Hopefully, before I leave this 3D, I'll figure it all out, or I'll find out. But there were things that have been hidden in terms of my identity, how I came into the family that I came into, and why, that are yet to be fully explained. So, suffice to say, I had a lot of fears. I was very much in fear and in trauma. I was shocked. It was traumatic to move from the South to the North, from a rural South area where everybody, children respected their elders, they were well behaved, certain things like education was valued. And then when we moved to Brooklyn, people didn't value education. African Americans did not value education. They scorned it. They were not well behaved. They were unruly. Everything kind of flipped for me, and I found myself in this world that was totally opposite what I had been brought up and trained to believe was the real world. So I had some different dichotomies, some splits in terms of my realities. My realities actually split when I moved to Brooklyn, because I got to see the total opposite side of what it was that I was taught in North Carolina. Okay, so enough of that. I'm saying all of this to say that eventually what took me so long was the death of my trauma. Once I attracted someone who was very much like my stepdad, but only covert, which became my husband of over 30 years, an abuser who was covert narcissist as far as I am concerned, as far as my experience is concerned. I'm not a psychologist, I want to make that clear, or a doctor or anything of that nature, but in my experience, the man that I was married to for over 30 years was a covert narcissist, and possibly, even worse. He possibly had other issues on the spectrum that were even, worse or just as bad as the covert narcissist. But it was very much that I married someone who was like my stepdad, who abused me, and dominated me, and groomed me to be in a very vulnerable position, because I didn't have any protection. So when I looked for someone in my older life, and I was depressed and I was in a state of vulnerability still when I met him when I went to college, he recognized the signs. He recognized that I couldn't see above the fray, and that he could manipulate and press buttons once he got to know who I was and what I had been through, and what buttons to push to make me go right or left. It was easy. It was an easy game, and so he did. And so I spent, like I said, over 30 years trying to figure this shit out and get out of the clutches of the new person who was controlling my life. And I knew that one of the things that was really interesting to me was that I felt that, and I still believe that had I left at any point in the relationship, which he gave me many reasons to leave, but had I left, I would have just wound up in another relationship that was the same, but with a different face, because I hadn't learned the lessons. So I was in it for the lessons. I was in it to understand and get to the crux of the situation, to change my life at the very fundamental level so that I could take control of my life, so that I could have power over my life. I didn't know what that took or what it would take. All I knew was that if I left, I would still have to answer those questions. And so wasn't it really, in my opinion, beneficial for me to leave? One of the reasons that was very strong for me to stay was that I come from and was raised in an African American background, which included slavery. And one of the things that happened in slavery was that the white man separated the family, and that broke down the strength, that broke down the culture, that broke down a lot. And so I was determined, not to allow that dynamic to occur with my family, because I knew that if I stuck with my husband, that I had so much of a better chance of improving the economic status and the social status of the family. I knew that. Whereby if I went on my own, I felt that I couldn't do that, which was fundamentally, looking at it today, an error. I could have done it. I just didn't believe in myself enough to do it because I was so afraid and so conditioned by my history of being brought up in a space of my stepdad telling me, no, you can't, you can't, you can't. And so that was more prevalent in my head. So my best option was to stay with the devil I knew and learn, excuse me, as much as I could about why it was that I would allow someone to do what they did and how. And at the time, I didn't recognize that I had picked the same type of a person as my stepdad. At the time, he looked nothing like that to me. Let's be clear about that. I would have never, had he shown up in that way, I would not have chosen him. But he was covert. So I didn't know. And so what you don't know, you don't know. You have to somehow learn. And so that was the process of the 30 years of going through it. And I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, that's when I really started to come up out of the weeds, where my head could peek above the weeds and see some of the stuff that was holding me in that relationship, some of the reasons that I created that relationship. And I needed that relationship to teach me what it was I needed to be and who I needed to be to stand on my own and to be free, to be sovereign, to be worthy, to be whole and complete without anyone. So there were a lot of lessons that I learned, but it was hell. It was hell getting up out of it. It was hell learning. But I'm grateful for the lessons. I'm grateful for the hell because it made me who I am today. And that is someone who can share my experiences, which is what I believe I'm called to do, with other people, with other women who are in similar situations. So hopefully it won't take you as long as it took me to understand and to move forward out of a really bad situation because of what you were primed for, because you were primed to be subjective, because you were primed to be a victim, because you were primed and groomed to be someone's, pawn, for lack of a better word, pawn, like a pawn on the chessboard. So those are the things, and I wanted to bring it back to fear, false evidence appearing real. That's what allows people or demonic forces or whatever it is to control other people. The idea of something that you are afraid of, the idea of something that you associate with something that has harmed you in the past. Not that that thing in the present that you're looking at could harm you, but you have such a strong association with a hurt from the past until you won't even allow your mind to accept any other reality. No, that is a threat and I don't want it anywhere near me, is how the mind works. So if something hurts you and it hurts you deeply, especially the younger you are, the more impact and the more you hold on to it, you survive it. You survive a thing, you survive a trauma, and you create a certain ways of being and behaving around that trauma, the survival of that trauma. After that trauma, you start doing things. And in your mental mind, it translates to, if I do these things, this set of actions, if I behave this way, if I view it from these glasses, I will continue to survive and I won't have to deal with that trauma again, because in the past when I had that trauma, I behaved in this way and I had these lenses and I survived. So I'm going to continue to do that, which is false evidence appearing real. It's something that we made up, a story that we made up about our trauma and the survival of our trauma that keeps us locked into our fear, our false evidence appearing real. If you are still with me, I hope you are. And that's what I noticed, okay? And that's what I had to break through, my own paradigm, my own beliefs, limiting beliefs. I had to look at them. I had to question them. I had to analyze them. I had to test them. I had to put myself in experiences that were not comfortable so that I could grow beyond my previous experiences. I'd done experiential transformational workshops, which put me in an environment that was safe because it was a training environment, but yet it gave me the space to look at, okay, does this really work? Does my concept, how I have it, my story really support me in getting to the next stage, to what I want next? And I found that it didn't. Wow, I found that it didn't. And I could give you one example that was really, really powerful for me. I was in this workshop and we were challenged to, after some topic was introduced, to go out into the public and to befriend a person and to have lunch with them, a stranger. And so, before this, I came from Brooklyn, from a very dangerous neighborhood, and I had this demeanor about myself that was, don't fuck with me. It was really, really loud. Do not fuck with me. I am so poor until, if you mess with me, it's going to make you messed up. And this was the tape that was in my mind that I ran to protect myself against predators in the street, because I wasn't protected by anything else. So I had to create this demeanor, this facade that said, do not. And I don't know how much of a facade it was, because I was very capable of just losing it because of the environment that I lived in. So I'm not saying I wasn't crazy, but I am saying I projected the image of crazy when I was in the streets. But yet it spilled over to all of my life. My whole demeanor said that. And if you didn't know me, you didn't want to know me. People who would walk down the street and look at me would cross the street because they didn't want to be around my energy. That's how strong it was. And so when I did this workshop and we were challenged to go out into the street, I had let that facade go. I put it down, let the shades come down on that, and I put up another one, which was a possibility of creating friendship, which was a possibility of good feelings, of mutual, kindness and all of that stuff. And so I went out in the street, and people started to smile at me, and I was like floored, because people never smiled at me. I was floored. They started to smile. They started to say hello as they walked by. I was able to meet a stranger, and we were able to break bread together. And I went back, and it was a truly paradigm shift, a belief, a reality shift from one way to another. And I had no idea that my demeanor had, that the demeanor of the hard person, of the evil, mean, mad person, had so much effect on all of my life. And that whenever anyone saw me, that's what they saw, and not a person who was congenial, not a person who had other things going on besides just being mad at the world. But I discovered that I could change that by who I was being, by what I was projecting, and that in fact I had made that up to protect myself, which was necessary at the time. But now in the workshop, it was getting in my way, because I wanted to be a success in society. I wanted to go into business. I wanted to do sales. And I couldn't do that with the demeanor I had. So it was very useful for me to know that there was a possibility that I could shift my life just by who I was being. And it was really powerful. But why am I saying that to you is to say that I'm saying that to say that a lot of times when you're in an abusive relationship is because we fear whatever it is that we fear. And that fear is always false evidence of fearing real, because really and truly we have the power to shift our being, who we're being. And when we shift who we're being, there's no power on the planet that can come up against that. There's no power on the planet that could have it be anything different than what it is. It is what it is you are what you're being, who you're putting out, the energy you're putting out, the intent in your mind, your intentions, consciously put out who you're being. And so I'm saying, that we can change and shift the impressions that people have on us, just like people who are very manipulative and up to no good can change the impressions that they put out to people so that they could take advantage. So it's a double-edged sword. There's like the front of your hand and the back of your hand. There are two sides, and depending on which side you choose and how you use this tool, depends on the effect it's going to have. You can choose to use it for good. You can use it for evil. And so in an abusive relationship, a lot of the times the abuser uses fear as a major motivating force. In Ivy League schools, I'm not sure, I think it was Wharton, they did studies with the rats on grids, and they realized that human beings react to either pain or pleasure. So if a person can find your pleasure point, they can control you. And if they can find your pain point, they can control you. If they have both, you have a really hard time of getting free of the control of a manipulator, of a person who wants to do you in. If they know your pain points and they know your pleasure points, they can push the buttons accordingly to get you to move where they want you to move, because basically that's what we're controlled by, pain and pleasure as human beings. We either go to pain or we go to pleasure. And so they create abusers a very, very sophisticated, intricate maze of pain and pleasure for the mouse per se, that's you, to run through to achieve the results that they want. But you don't know that. You don't know you're being pushed by pain and pleasure. You're not thinking how to manipulate and control. You don't know the levers that they're pulling, so you're just reacting. And they're watching your reactions and using your reactions to further hone in their ability to manipulate and control you. This is some of the stuff that I learned, and being in these type relationships, especially the marriage. So I'm just saying that there's just so many ways. So it's like, for example, how do you tell that someone is doing this to you? How do you tell that someone doesn't have your best interests at mind? Well, deep down, you always know. Okay, that's the number one thing. Trust your intuition if you can access it. So you always really do know. It's just getting to the intuition, your trust of yourself. Trusting yourself is a big deal. If you have low self-esteem, you don't trust yourself. So they're looking for people who don't trust themselves because they have low self-esteem, because then you're more controllable. So the first question to ask is, do I trust myself? And if I don't, how do I begin to trust myself? How do I shift that so that I am in charge of my loyalties to me, and I am not loyal and selling myself out to the enemy, to another person? How do I do that? And so with that, I'm going to pull some cards from the Psychic Tarot, the Oracle deck, to see what Spirit has to say about how we do that. The first card is Crown Chakra. And I'm going to read that. Still checking. Okay, evidently it's a major arcana, I believe. No? Okay, Crown Chakra. Bear with me, this book has several. Okay, here we go. The color is violet. Sound is none or om can be used. The element is thought. The gland is the pineal. The key word is I know. The crown chakra is located at the top of the head and has been called the 1,000-petal lotus, or the receiver of light. This chakra is the center of your link with the universe, the infinite, and your higher consciousness. It's the connection between wisdom and spiritual insight. The crown chakra is the area where the ethereal light and the energy are received and then dispensed throughout your aura for total well-being. To balance this chakra, I find that the meditation, breath work, and yoga, spiritual healing, acupuncture, and color therapy work best. When properly aligned, your crown chakra will expand to the point where it is possible to access and tap into the deepest sources of wisdom. So that's how you do it. You have to do work with your crown chakra. So what I would recommend highly, and I did work with yoga. I became a yoga master, not master, but a teacher. I did a yoga teacher training, and I got certified. It took me 9 months to do it. I became a Reiki master. I did a lot of meditation. So those are the things that you want to begin to do in order to better trust yourself, to intuit, to connect to your intuition, to know when it's your intuition versus outside fears and society that's telling you something. There's a difference. It's a different feeling. It's a difference in knowing a thing versus just thinking that something is the way it is or judging a thing. There's a difference. When you know something, It's a core feeling, it's a core energy that exudes from within you outward. It's like it's truth. Where if you believe something, it may be true, it may not be true based on your judgment, based on your experience of this life. But it's not coming from the core inner belief and solidity of, like, this is a stick in the mud. I stand on this because I know this with every fiber of my being. So trust yourself. That's the first step. And I'm going to leave it there for today. I'd like to thank you for listening in. If you have any questions, please put your remarks. I'm going to leave the comments open, test and see how that goes. You can contact me through my email. Please like and subscribe. It does the channel a great deal of good. And I hope you have a blessed day. Ciao.